asking you to do is to shop early, and in addition to shopping local. During the weekdays, it's what really helps with keeping numbers down inside the store. Mornings have gotten a little busier than since we've been suggesting that time. So maybe mid-afternoon at this point. It changes, of course, everywhere. One other thing, we will be recording this, and it's going to be a very special recording that Rachel and Joe will get into later. But don't worry, we are going to post it onto YouTube, but you're not going to be the one recorded with your face, just the people in the yellow box like this, just the people who aren't muted. I'm going to hand things back over to Rachel.
We're going to sing a lot of Beatles songs, so, you know.
Yeah,
ready.
That's good.
Fantastic. That's what we all need. It is really such a thrill to be here tonight with this special off-the-shelf virtual event with James Patterson presenting two new books, The Last Days of John Lennon and Deadly Cross. Our wonderful interviewer will be introducing our guest author this evening, but I did want to add that in addition to writing great books, Mr. Patterson is a tremendous force for good in the book world as a whole. Over the years, he's given countless grants to bookstores, libraries, and schools. And I was actually a lucky and very grateful recipient of one of his bookseller holiday bonuses a few years back. So thank you very much for that. In pre-pandemic times, some of our most popular event programs are off-the-shelf events with Joe Donahue of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in conversation with the guest author. In our virtual present, we're taking this model to Zoom. This event will be recorded and later broadcast on public radio stations across the country on Joe's book show. So please keep yourselves muted and follow along with Joe as he guides you through Radioland. Joe Donahue is, of course, the Vice President of News and Programming for WAMC. He's best known for his continuing work as a talk show host and interviewer and his daily award-winning roundtable program. His guests have included really everybody who's anybody, including 7 presidents, the Dalai Lama, Stephen King, Maya Angelou, and James Patterson, to name just a few. Joe has been honored with over 50 national and local awards for interviewing achievements and has been a steadfast, loyal friend of Northshire Bookstore. Please join me in welcoming Joe Donahue and James.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel, and thanks to everybody. It's so good to see you all, a lot of familiar faces, and thank you for supporting Northshire and for being there, and obviously for coming, walking all the way to your living room or wherever you are to watch us. It's very, very nice. So the way we're going to work this tonight, if you've been to any of our live events, it's pretty much the same way. I'm going to, I'll read an introduction and then we'll go into the interview. We'll talk for, Jim and I will talk for probably about a half hour. I'll wrap it up and then we'll go to your questions, which Rachel will ask for and put in the chat box, and I'll go through them when that time comes. And I think other than that, how are you, Jim? Everything okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready. I'm roaring to get
ready to
go. Yeah.
All right. Man,
pretty people out there. This is nice.
It looks great, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm doing an introduction. Let me just quickly check with our wonderful producer, Sarah LeDuc, who is on. Sarah, we are okay? Everything is fine? We are good?
She's muted, but she says yes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Good. Here we go in 3, 2, and 1. Welcome to the Book Show, a celebration of reading and writers. I'm Joe Donahue. James Patterson is the world's best-selling author. The creator of Alex Cross, he's produced more enduring fictional heroes than any other novelist alive. He joins us this week to discuss his 3 latest books. The Last Days of John Lennon is the amazing story of Lennon's life and career from his earliest days and first songs up to the last seconds of his life. The book is a true crime drama about 2 men who changed history, one whose indelible songs enliven our world to this day, and the other who ended the beautiful music with 5 pulls of a trigger. In Deadly Cross, the murder of a glamorous DC socialite becomes Alex Cross's deadliest case since along came a spider, and Detective Kylie McDonald of NYPD Red returns in the latest NYPD Red 6. We have lots to discuss in a Zoom conversation as part of a Northshire Bookstore off-the-shelf event. It is a great pleasure to welcome James Patterson to this week's book show. How are you, sir?
I'm good. It's nice to be in Vermont while being in Florida.
And Saratoga.
Well, yes, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
It's wonderful to have you here. It's always good to talk to you. So what does it feel to have conquered? How does it feel to have conquered the world?
I don't think about any of that, honestly. Lennon he made that famous comment about being more famous than Jesus. And I think what he was saying was, this is absurd, that you're putting a rock group on a pedestal the way you are, and it's crazy. And because I think he really was sort of a person of the people and very down to earth, and he knew that the fame was kind of insane. And in a similar vein, a somewhat similar vein, one of the newspapers did a thing, and I was more famous in England than Shakespeare, and I feel the same way about that. How stupid are the people? That's ridiculous. I mean, come on. You ever read any Shakespeare? You know, did you ever read my books? Big, you know, there's a big difference here. At any rate, so I just don't have a big head about it. I don't think it's a big thing. And one of the things, you know, our son's 23 now, and he's always grown up. Yeah, my dad writes books, big deal. It's fine. So yeah, so I write books, big deal.
Well, I want to get back to that process in a little bit, but let's go through the new titles if we can. Of course,
Sure.
You mentioned The Last Days of John Lennon, which is the brand new book. This came out on the anniversary of Lennon's assassination. What brought you to the subject of John Lennon?
I think there are a lot of things. I mean, on a personal level, one, I mean, as a kid, back in when the hell was it? 1964. I remember I was driving to high school, had some kids in the back, old Rambler, and the DJ came on and he said, "There's this band and they're really big in England. They're not going to make it here, but I'll play a couple of songs, see what you think." And they played "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "She Loves You." And we're in the car going, I don't know, man, that sounded pretty good to us. And by the end of the week, the two songs are #1 and #2. So there's my first experience with the Beatles. In 1980, I was living in New York City. I was living on Central Park West. I was 9 blocks away from the Dakota. And I don't know where I heard it. It might have been on Monday Night Football with Howard Cosell, who announced it on the air. I don't remember how. I immediately walked up the street because it was so close, and there were already 100 or so people outside of the Dakota, which is a spooky building anyway. That's where they filmed Rosemary's Baby. And it was just one of those sad, numbing, you can't believe it happened. I think even more than, I mean, having gone through Kennedy's assassination, you know, JFK, and then Bobby, and then Martin Luther King, we sort of go, okay, it's political. Here you're like shooting this poet, you know, rock personalities. Why? It just seems so insane. So this whole thing is very personal to me right now, which is really the weirdest thing of all in some ways. I'm in Florida. There is a bridge that connects my house to the house next door, which was owned by John and Yoko. They were refurbishing it in 1980 when he was shot. And they planned to live here, whatever, half the year, whatever. He, you know, you hear it in a lot of the Beatles songs, "Sun, sun, sun, sun," because right. I think there's so much rain, rain, rain in England and London that I think there's something about the sun, and he wanted to be in the sun down in Florida, and he was a sailor and all that stuff. So a lot of personal stuff. I also felt that on some level, I didn't love, there's been a lot of books written about him, but a lot of them are by rock journalists, and they want to keep a distance, and they want to, you know, oh, what's the best album and what's the best song? And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to, you know, really make it very personal and very emotional and really dig in. And when I'm writing, a lot of times I'll write on the top of the chapter, "Be there." I want to be in the scene. I want my readers to be in the scene. I want them to feel Chapman. I want them to feel John. I want them. So what I tried to set out to do in the book is, one, you do the murder mystery. Two, and not necessarily in this order, tell people the story of the Beatles. And a lot of people don't know it. We think we do, but we really don't. And they were babies when they started. I mean, when they went over to Germany to sort of polish their act, they weren't even called the Beatles. But Harrison was 16. I don't even know why his mom let him go, you know? And then the love story between John and Yoko, which at the time, a lot of people weren't comfortable with it. She was older. She didn't seem right for him in turn. You know, a lot of people felt that. And now the way we are, I think a lot of us, it's like, you know what? it's acceptable and cool, and they fit each other, and they were very much in love. So at any rate, all that stuff got me to try to do this book and do the best job that I could do.
It's really fascinating because, as you said, they were babies, and it's several times in the book, even as their career established, because obviously when you're talking about them when they're very young and they're starting out, we know how old they are, and then when the fame hits, and not just fame, but whatever level they hit is just enormous. And you at one point say, "Oh well, he's 25 years old," and you think, "My God, to deal with that as a kid, really, 22, 23, 24 years old. That's insane. Absolutely insane.
And they hadn't, not a lot of schooling. So they weren't prepared in any way. I don't think anybody could have been prepared, but they really weren't prepared. And one of the interesting things for me in terms of doing the book, and why the shooting was even more tragic, I think he had become much more of a complete human being in the last 4 or 5 years of his life. He was a serious dad. He was taking it seriously, especially with Sean. He was a cook. He was, incredibly in love with Yoko. And he had just done the first album in 5 years with Double Fantasy. So boom, he was like, I don't know, fully human, more fully human than he maybe had ever been. And then to have this very sad occurrence in front of the Dakota.
When you were writing the book and when setting it up and laying it out, you obviously, as you mentioned, you tell the story of the Beatles, and it is an interesting telling of their origin story, because you do bring us there. You bring us to the studio. You bring us to the frustration that the people around them had. You had their own frustrations, and of course their great successes. But interwoven in that, every once in a while, we hear the voice of Mark David Chapman himself as to what is on his mind and what he's thinking and how he is moving towards that horrible night at the Dakota.
Right. And all of this is going to come tumbling down. Exactly.
Yes. And that is obviously where I think those of us who read you and love you know that you're so good at that, of planting those moments just at the right time and getting us to the point of saying, okay, I'll stay up for another half hour. But I found it fascinating because it almost, those moments when we are in the mind of Mark David Chapman for a moment, also very much parallel what's going on within the life of John Lennon, who is dealing with, as you said, is dealing with assassinations during the 60s, is dealing with great political strife, is dealing with the fallout from Vietnam, exactly, and the fallout from his comments about being bigger than Jesus Christ. So those pop up at times where his story, it's Mark David Chapman, we get to understand a little bit more as to how he came to that horrible decision.
Yeah, I'm not as interested in Chapman, and initially there was more on Chapman in the book, and I cut a lot of it out and put in more about the Beatles. I mean, one of the interesting things is, like when I did, I'm doing nonfiction a little differently than it's generally done, because I just want to tell stories. It's more of a novelist approach. I did it with the Jeffrey Epstein book, Filthy Rich, which then became that Netflix series. I did it with House of Kennedys. It's just story after story after story after story, and tell it that way. It's not going to be everything, a Churchill, 1,500 pages where you're going to know everything about Churchill, but you're going to get the story. And for a lot of people, that's a good way to deal with, or at least it's one way to deal with nonfiction, and it's different, I think, and about. I wouldn't want all nonfiction to go this way, but it's I think it's useful.
James Patterson is our guest. This is a Northshire Bookstore off-the-shelf event, a Zoom conversation, and the name of the new book that we're discussing now is The Last Days of John Lennon. I also really enjoyed, what was the first foray into nonfiction for you? I really enjoyed the Aaron Hernandez book.
The first one was Filthy Rich.
Was Filthy Rich.
That was the Epstein. And one of the fascinating things there was the Netflix thing. We just start looking at the way the world is changing. There was that documentary came on there. 100 million people saw that in the first 10 days. I mean, that's just in terms of the way the world is changing, whatever the heck is going on now. And the other curious thing about that book was I put it out in 2016. I knew it was an unbelievable story. I personally took it to CNN and Fox and all the networks, Wall Street Journal, and Wall Street Journal covered it, but nobody else would. They didn't see it as a big story. I'm going like, what are you kidding? 200 young girls. This guy gets off with 11 months. It's a billionaire. It's insanity. It's like one of the worst. It's the Me Too. It's the worst Me Too story of all of them, and it's an incredible story of injustice in the American so-called justice system. And then like 3 years later, for a variety of reasons, all of a sudden everybody's covering that story. So I don't know, nuts.
So let's talk about the other book, which is brand new, and that is Deadly Cross. That is the latest Alex Cross book.
Sure.
And the murder of a glamorous DC socialite becomes Alex Cross's deadliest case since Along Came a Spider. It says that right on the front cover.
Oh my God, it must be true.
It must be true.
I hope it's true.
It's there. It tells us what we need to know.
It's a good story. It's a good story. The one thing, the little whatever, somebody dies in the book that you won't be expecting. I won't say who, and you can't. No matter what you say, I won't tell you.
Okay.
No.
Well, I read it, so I know. But okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you cry? Some people shed a little tear. Whatever.
I'll shut up. Okay. But I have to ask you. This is. You collaborate on many of your books. The Lennon book is a collaboration.
Yeah.
The Alex Cross books you do not. What is the reason behind that?
I don't know. I started it that way, and I'd like to be able to do all of them, but I can't. I'd like to be able to write all of them by myself. I do all 95% of the outlines. I do the whole out. My outlines tend to be anywhere from 50 to 80 pages. Interestingly, to me, where the style came from that I write now, when I was doing Along Came a Spider, I wrote like a 300 and some page outline.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read the outline, I went, this is the book. I mean, I elaborated a bit on it, but this is the book, the short chapters, the colloquial style of writing, the simple storytelling. I went, this is different. It's incredible. I find it very readable. And Bruce Springsteen actually did something very similar for Nebraska, that album of his, where he had put down rough tracks on everything and he carried it around for about 9 months. And then he went, no, this is it. This is it. These this is Nebraska. But that's where the style came from. It was that first and that very, short chapters, get right to it, no messing around. And it goes into the last days of John Lennon and kind of anything, the kids' books, same thing. Yeah. Short, get to the point, tell the story. I try to pretend there's one person sitting across from me. I'm telling them a story and I don't want them to get up until I finished. And I guess that's probably the strength and the weakness of the books. I don't go off in these tangents. I won't do The Stand. I couldn't do that. I can't do a 1,000-page book.
I don't know how that could be a weakness if that's what you're comfortable writing.
It's a little bit of a weakness. Right? I always have this theory, greatest strength is greatest weakness.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to Alex Cross, this seems to be a character not only that you are fond of, but obviously readers are fond of. He's been with us for a very long time. What is it, do you think, about the character that has struck a chord with audiences and even with you that you want to continue?
With me, I'm just not tired. I did two nights ago with Lee Child, one of these events, and we were talking about Reacher and Cross, and he was talking about how he thinks it's a bad idea to fall in love with your main character. And I know what he's talking about because you have to have some of the warts and some of the, Alex is bigger than life. And I know that every once in a while, somebody will go, well, this isn't very realistic. And I don't think that's valid criticism. I don't write realism. So you can say, I don't like it, but don't say it's not realistic, because it's not supposed to be. That's like somebody looking at a Picasso and go, it's not very realistic. Really? I don't write realism. And Alex is bigger than life. The stories are bigger than life. They relate to life, I think. I think that life in the inner city in Washington is very difficult. And so we're going to sort of raise the stakes on that a little bit. I like the idea that Alex is a little bigger than life, that he's the reason that Morgan Freeman wanted to play the part, he said, what I love about Alex is Alex solves things with his brain rather than brawn. And he has, I mean, obviously he can be tough when he has to be, but he does solve things with his head. And I really like that. I think the family is important to people. Nana Mama, I've had threats against my life if I even hurt the cat, which actually the cat hasn't been in a few books and nobody's complained. So I'm shocked that people aren't asking about the cat and whether the cat is okay. I will tell you people the cat is okay.
That's fine.
The cat just hasn't fit into any of the stories for a while. But Nana and the kids keep growing, and I can relate to that because our son is now 23 and whatever. So he keeps growing and, whatever that is. But I think you get attached to characters. And I mean, they've done studies where sometimes the brain can't separate between a family member and a character that you watch on television who you fall in love with over the course of a couple of years. And I think there's some truth to that. So I think a lot of people have a real connection to Cross in the family. And I do. And I'm still interested in him, and he keeps growing and changing. And one of the reasons I put him in Washington is a lot of stuff could believably happen there. It's an interesting city. It's a complicated city. It's got an inner city. It has the government. It's got wealth. It has the different, government agencies, the FBI, the DEA. They're all, everything's there. I always really like people like who's a Hillerman. And he's out there in New Mexico, and he's got this little town. I mean, eventually he'll have killed everybody in that town. It's just this little town, and so yeah.
Anyway. One by one, Tony Hillerman will do them in.
Right.
But with that said, it is one of the things I like about Alex Cross is that this is a character who has been impacted. When we read this book, the damage, the scars of the previous cases are attached to this man. Sometimes in crime fiction, our hero seems to get showered up, washed off, cleansed of anything, and then you throw him into a new situation. Right. Alex is very much impacted by what he has seen in his years.
Yeah, and I think most cops are. And also I'm doing, which I think is, in my mind, the most important book I've ever done. It's a book coming out in February called Walk in My Combat Boots.
Yeah. And
I'm doing it, it's nonfiction. I'm doing it with Matt Eversman. Matt was, you remember the movie Black Hawk Down? He was the actual sergeant. He then went on to, actually at Fort Drum, Army Ranger training and whatever. And I watched Matt do some interviews of soldiers, and a lot of us, like when my father came back from the war, he never would talk to us at all about what happened, ever. And I think a lot of people where the father or the mother or the brother or whatever, they just won't talk about it. But because Matt comes from it, and because he can ask the right questions and ask the right follow-up questions, they would talk to him. And I went to Matt and I said, I want to do a book. The concept is Walk in My Combat Boots, which wound up being the subject. And we did a couple hundred interviews, and the interviews tend to be 30 or 40 pages. I then made them like 6-page stories, and they're so unbelievably intense. And we've had, I don't know, several generals just go like, it's one of the most important books about war ever, and what goes on over there. And what Matt and I wanted to do was, one, if you've been there, you'll say, these people got it right, especially from on the ground. the grunts, the people who are actually out there in the field. It's so true and so accurate. And it's the kind of stories that people never tell to their families. And then if you're one of these people that think you know about everything, but you know about nothing, you'll go, I had it all wrong about soldiers. Because a lot of people think that it's all these kids that just, they play video games and they want to go over and shoot people. It's not, even if it starts that way for some kids, by the time they go through basic training and write their death letter, I think I'm going to die and I don't want to die. I want to protect these people around me, my brothers and sisters. And I've seen that the world is a lot bigger and more complicated than I thought it was back in Saratoga or Wyoming or whatever. I may like it or dislike it, but it's not what I thought it was. And it's a fascinating book, in my opinion. And everybody who's read it so far, it just blows their mind. The lawyer at Little Brown, we had her read about 12 chapters because she had to write releases for everybody in the book. And she said, I have no interest in soldiers. She said she read like 80 pages. It was riveting to her. And she said she cried like 3 times in the 80 pages. And that's the effect the thing has on people. And you just don't, you start a book and you have no idea. You know, initially a book like that, I'm going, I don't know, how are we going to make it interesting enough? How are we going to keep it interesting? So it's from story to story, but the stories are so different, and some are exhilarating, and some are so sad, and it's just, I don't know. I'm just so delighted, and that's nonfiction. I'm not doing one on nurses, same basic principle. So whatever. Yeah.
That's the pipeline.
I don't know what got me off on that, but
that's the pipeline. But so I find this interesting. James Patterson is our guest. You're listening to the book show, and let me just ask you, because the book you just mentioned is coming out in February. So when was that done? When did you complete that?
Not long ago.
Okay.
This has been a quick, boom, 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 and because there's really no editing. It's just, here it is, folks. We went out, we got, General McChrystal did a great, and the quotes that we got, it's, sometimes they do these sort of haphazard blurbs. These things are so emotional in terms of General McChrystal. I mean, he was like, it's great. It's unbelievable. It's so true. I gave it to President Clinton. I didn't want a blurb, but he said, I have to do this. He said, he'd known so many soldiers, and he said, but he'd never really felt it the way he did with this book. So the whole process went, very, very quickly. And then, now we have a lot of people, I don't know, Little Brown, and I'm sure they'll send it out for you guys to read, whatever you have, the ARCs.
Yes, the advanced reading copies. Yes,
yeah.
You said that very nicely about about President Clinton. Also, a co-author of yours.
Yeah, we actually have another book this year, The President's Daughter. And I liked, and once again, this is another one, you never know. I liked the way The President is Missing turned out, because what it was, I mean, it's an over-the-top story to some extent, but if that happened, it would happen this way. Okay, so and he could supply information and reality that most thriller writers can't get. This is what would really happen if that happened. Here's what the Secret Service would actually do. And the same thing with The President's Daughter, which I think is actually a better book than The President is Missing, I think. It's a president who he's left office and his daughter gets kidnapped, and it's very complicated in terms of what can happen. But if it happened, here's at any rate. So that's coming.
Does he write it? Does
he write some? Yeah, absolutely.
Does he write? He writes parts and sends them to you, and you work together.
And I get to say, Bill, it's not really that. No. Yeah, no, he's good. He's good. He's not as
veto power.
That's right. Yeah, and he goes like, you can't edit my stuff. You can't edit my stuff, Jill. Jill, you can't say that to me. That's
very nice.
Right. I'm the president.
Very nice. And also, I mentioned the third book is NYPD Red 6. This is the third book to come out in December. This will be out. I've enjoyed this series. I have to tell you. So I'm reading through this, and chapter 68. There were 6 NYPD detectives working on the Department of Investigation, at the Department of Investigation. Any one of them could have helped us track down Banta, but when you're investigating an uninformed member of the FDNY, you want a detective that will ask very few questions. That was Joe Donahue. I'm a character in a James Patterson book. One of the highlights of my life.
Okay, well, that's what we do. We try to keep.
I know you make us happy. That's good.
Yeah.
These series, when you come up with a new series and you say, "Oh, well, this will be interesting," is it how much you have a marketing background? Do you think of it in those terms of, "Oh, okay, well, look, we haven't explored this way"?
I probably can't help myself on some level, but the answer is no. What I try to do is, if I saw this book or read about this book, I would be interested in it. And it wouldn't be like, oh yeah, another whatever the heck, that there'd be something cool about it that would pull me in. And then I go, I think it would pull other people in as well. Like I thought John Lennon, I don't know, it's time. And I think a lot of people don't know the story. And I thought I could, once again, telling all of those things, the Beatles story, the murder story, the love story. I thought I could do something that would be somewhat unique. And I thought I would like to read it. I thought the Kennedy thing, same thing. I mean, there to me, that's the America's royal family. That's America's crown. We have a pilot for hopefully a big, limited series thing. It was written by the woman Barbara Hall, who she was the showrunner on Madam Secretary. So it's good. It's cool. And I will say, I'm always hopeful.
And Joan of Arcadia. She was also the showrunner on that.
Yeah.
Great show. Yeah. Great stuff. Well, the new books are, you got 3 of them. The Last Days of John Lennon, Deadly Cross, and NYPD Red 6. At least 2 of them are published by Little Brown. The paperback, which is NYPD Red 6, is out from Grand Central.
Yeah.
And Jim, it's great to talk to you. It's always very, very nice to speak with you, and I thank you very much for spending time with us.
I thank you, Joe. Good to talk to you again.
We enjoy hearing from our listeners
and support these guys, our bookstores, man.
Absolutely.
They say, I say, come all the time. Come morning and night.
You've been very good independent bookstores, and certainly we thank you for that. We enjoy hearing from our listeners about our shows. You can email us at book@wamc.org, and you can listen again to this or find past book shows via podcast or at wamc.org. This program was done in collaboration with Northshire Bookstore, northshire.com. Sarah LeDuc produces our program. Bookmark us for next week, and thanks for listening. For The Book Show, I'm Joe Donahue. All right. That was great. You're good at this.
No, it's good questions. That's the whole key. You get good questions, or like sometimes there was a thing on the Sunday morning CBS thing, and they had like Meryl Streep and 3, and you can't lose if you get people like that.
That's true.
They're all funny and smart, and whatever. How can you?
We have questions. We have time for questions till for 20 minutes or so. So if you have a question, please just go into the chat box, and I'll be going through them, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can in the time that we have. So Rena, I believe is the pronunciation of the name, Reina. Rena asks, how involved was Yoko in the writing of the book?
She wasn't. She's not well. She's having physical problems. We tried to get to her, we couldn't. Paul leaned in a bit, which was nice, in that they were in conflict as the Beatles. They both wanted to be leader of the band, kind of thing. And then after the Beatles broke up, there was a lot of bad blood for a couple of years, and they then became friendly again. And I think at this stage, Paul, I think he misses him. I think he loved John very much. And I think with Paul, he would have just assumed that the Beatles just were still going. So that was emotional, but we didn't get Yoko. But I have spoken, because we've been doing a lot of radio and stuff, to several people who interviewed her, and they all found her to be a delight, just a very nice person. And I really did think the love story was people didn't understand it, but I think it was a real love story. They had a rough patch when John was, I think, getting his act together. But yeah, so.
We got this question from another reader who said, I'm reading the Lennon book now, and I'm very interested in your research style. Talk about the books and articles that you read about Lennon.
Well, I mean, part of it is just reading everything you get your hands on. And then the other part of it is as many interviews as you can get. There's a photographer who's a good friend of mine. He actually came over with the Beatles, Harry Benson.
Oh, yeah.
And he took that famous shot, which I actually have in the office, of the memorial service, or the big thing in Central Park. There's about 90,000 people, and somebody's holding up that big poster that says "Why," and Harry took that shot. He took a lot of the famous shots about the Beatles, and he knew them really, really well. And I talked to, and he said he liked all of them on a personal level, but his favorite was John, and he said John was the deep one. John was the deep. He said Paul was probably the best musician and probably the best at writing melodies, but Paul was deep. And Paul, especially later in the Beatles, and then when he went solo, he wanted his music to be able to somehow affect life a little bit, affect the ending the war in Vietnam, dealing with violence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he particularly loved Paul.
Alma wonders, have you ever met a Beatle?
No.
Yeah. Let's
I did. I'm a rock and roll person, though. I did. Yeah. I worked at the Fillmore East. I don't know who remembers that, but that was the big Bill Graham. It was in New York City. And so I saw Jimi Hendrix and the Rolling Stones, not the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, the Doors, Jefferson Airplane. The Hendrix concert was interesting because I don't know how soon after that he died. But at that point, he would come in and kind of just play sort of jazzy stuff, and it would irritate people in the audience because they wanted to hear all the hits. But the lead-in group that night, the sort of warm-up group, nobody had ever heard of them, and they were great. And it was Sly and the Family Stone, and they blew the place away. But anyway, so that was really cool. And like everybody my age, they say they went. I actually went to Woodstock. And I know all you people say you went, but I didn't see any of you there. So yeah. But I was there, and I have the muddy jeans to prove it.
I'm curious that because in the book, in the Lennon book, you do talk a lot about influences in both of who influenced the Beatles and who the Beatles influenced. It's really a fascinating passing of the torch.
Well, with Lee Child, he talked about being a kid in England at the time, and it was sort of like he said it was bland, and he said rock and roll woke up the kids there. And all of those groups were really aware of each other. I mean, the Beatles and the Stones and Traffic and Yardbirds, et cetera, et cetera. They all knew one another's music, and they were competitive, but they also helped one another. And John, obviously, I mean, he part of the book are different little things like, he loved Elton. Elton had a drag name for him. He called him Carol Dakota.
Yeah,
his drag name for John, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, whatever. It's interesting stuff.
It is interesting stuff. Yeah. Gene asked.
One of the things, speaking of curiosities, when they started, I mean, here's a group that did like over 200 songs, and almost all of them. In fact, people think they wrote Twist and Shout. They don't know about the Ozzy Brothers. But when they started, none of them wrote or read music.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're even worried at one point, as you write in the book, that they're even early on that they're concerned when they go on stage that people will find them out.
Yeah.
When they first go to the studio.
Yeah, I have the same problem.
Yeah. Let's see. We have this question from Gene, who says, "Do you think authors often kill off their main characters when they become well loved because they feel threatened by them?"
I don't know, man. I'm not other authors.
Yeah.
I'm not threatened by Alex, and I think it's a decent question. I think sometimes it's just they don't have any more to say about the character. They're bored with the character, where they want to do something else. I have actually. I mean, there's certain, a couple of the kids' character things I've stopped. iFunny, which I really like the character in that, but I stopped the series. I don't know, some of the, actually NYPD Red Marshal's going to keep doing that. I'm kind of going to go off of that series.
Yeah. Marshall Karp, who co-writer on that book.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, let's see. Aiden says, you obviously you write many books. How many books do you tend to read at one time?
Oh, it's a disaster. Yeah. And I never remember what the hell I'm reading. I mean, here's the Phil Clay book. Here's, I don't know what the hell that one is. Here's the Obama, the Shirley Hazard, the short stories. I don't know. This is just like what's sitting here. There's more in the next room. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah, probably 5 or 6, whatever. There's a, I'm so bad with names.
Yeah.
And why should I give,
other authors plugs?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it depends.
Although the Obama book, I'm really enjoying. That's very well written.
He's a good writer. Yeah. I actually loved his first book the best. I don't remember the name of it, but that one I really liked a lot. I mean, I guess when you get to be president, you have to have a certain majesty to your, whatever. I wouldn't know, but because I've never been president, but that's my guess.
So we got this one from Severn, who says, I am a youth services public librarian. So
I see them. There they are. They're like, oh, that's us.
Yes, God bless them for their work. Yeah. The kids love your iFunny books. How do you know how to relate so well to young people?
Believe it or not, I was a child. I'm still in touch with that. It helped that, because we brought up, Jack was little, and that's actually where I got into kids stuff. Kids' books when we were bringing Jack up, and my notion, even with my imprint for kids, our mission is when a kid finishes a Jimmy book, Jimmy is the imprint, they'll say, please give me another book, as opposed to millions of kids who say, I've never read a book that I liked. So I think that's really important, and I don't think it's dumbing down. I just think there are a lot of books that are good stories, and they're good for you too. I just did Becoming Muhammad Ali with Kwame Alexander, and it's gotten like 5-star reviews from everything. And at times, I think on Sunday they'll name it one of their favorite kids' books of the year. They hate that because they have to include me in it, but it's the way it goes. But it's a good book, and it's good for you. And I think that's an important thing in terms of the kids' books, that they read it and they go, let me read another one.
Okay, so first of all, we just had Kwame Alexander on the show.
Did he say nice things about me?
Yes.
I see how generous I am. I say he's a nice guy. And,
yes. No, he's a very, very, but my God, is he
I'm nicer.
Great. He's real. Yes, you are. You're very, very nice. No, he's a force of nature, that guy. Yeah, he's just amazing.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I've appeared with him a couple of times, and I learned the lesson of I lead, I do not follow. Because he comes out there, 1, he has a guitar player with him. 2, he'll do these, like poetic things that go on for like 10 minutes. And it's, you don't want to, don't follow that.
No, I can understand that. Yeah, he's
I'm Sly and the Family Stone. He's Hendrix, but for real, before he got totally stoned out of his mind.
Do you have a favorite book that you've written, and do you prefer writing series or standalone books?
My favorite is actually the Black Book. It just sort of as I say, you never know when you start it, but everything seemed to fall into place in that one in terms of the characters, the way the suspense, when it's a little, it starts, it stops, it starts, it stops. I really like that book. I like that character a lot. And then there are others. I mean, some of the Alex, Along Came a Spider and Kissed the Girls, I like a lot. The new one I think is good. whoever wrote that thing about it's as good as Along Came a Spider. I'm not going to argue with them. Yeah.
All right. Bob says, did your background in advertising influence the way you approach writing?
I was in advertising, but I've been clean for over 25 years. So how dare you bring that up? Did it influence? I don't know. It made me aware that there's an audience, okay? Because you come into advertising, you think you know it all, you're a kid out of college or whatever, and oh yeah, I can do this stuff. I see it and then you do your spot and they test it and like nobody noticed it. And you go, oh, okay, that's not good. So you just become aware that there's an audience, and for better or worse, as I said, greatest strength, greatest weakness. And greatest strength is I'm really aware of the audience and I'm aware of trying to make sure that I don't lose them. And maybe that's the greatest weakness too, because maybe better if I, wasn't so conscious of not losing the reader.
What was the initial draw to say, okay, enough of with this career in advertising, I'd like to write?
I hated it. No, I tell you, just a quick story. So I'm in advertising. I'm writing the books. I'm loving writing the books. I'm not really liking the advertising. It's a Sunday, and I have a little place on the ocean in New Jersey, and I have to go back to New York City on Sunday to do some stupid advertising thing. And I'm in traffic that's going like 5 miles an hour, okay, on the Garden State or Jersey Turnpike, one of the two. So I'm trapped, and I'm thinking, oh man, I was at the ocean and it was so cool. And on the other side of the road, about every 15 seconds, whoosh, there's nobody over there, 15 seconds, whoosh. And I'm watching this for a couple of hours, and it finally occurs to me the secret and the object lesson that I need to learn here. And I mean this seriously, you need to think about it a little bit because it sounds flip. I realized that the whole direction of my life was wrong. I had to get on that side of the road. I don't want to be on that traffic jam going to advertising. I want to be on that Freedom Express over there. And that's the express where you go and it's good and you're doing what you want to do and you're writing books and you're looking for somebody to love, that was my two big things. I'd been with a woman who died, unfortunately, brain cancer, and I hadn't found anybody else. So I got on the other side of the road was write books and find somebody to love or somebody who would put up with me, whatever.
When you look at there are many, I can think of John Grisham, I believe Scott Turow, people who had other careers who then say...
Grisham, I don't think ever really had a career. He kind of like did the law school thing, didn't like it, and kind of, you know what I mean? He apparently hated being a lawyer. Similarly, like Michael Crichton, this is incredible to me, goes all the way through medical school and then goes, I'm going to write books. He was writing books in medical school, but
Yeah. But to the point where you think, were you at a point where you just say, okay, I can leave this profession and start a new one, or did you have to sort of write part-time and establish that career before you could leave the advertising?
Oh no, I was writing. I published the first book when I was 26. Got turned down by 31 publishers. It then won an Edgar as best first mystery. So go figure that one out. But I was writing while I was right from the get-go. I had no interest. I didn't do a career of advertising. I was a writer. I went there to write. I was paying the electricity bill. I know, and then when Jane died, this woman that I was with, I threw myself into advertising and went from copywriter who hated it to chairman in about 3 years. It was ridiculous, but whatever. And I just because I couldn't have any free time, I was, it was too. I couldn't handle Jane's death.
So we have this question from Tracy, who asks, "Is there a favorite movie from your books?" And I would add on to that question of what makes a good adaptation for you.
I don't know. I haven't found it yet. The kids middle school, that was okay. That wasn't a bad movie. Middle school, the worst years of my life. The kids movie. The others, look, Morgan Freeman's great. So God bless. So that part of With Along Came a Spider and Kiss the Girls, I didn't think either one was terribly good as a movie. They're okay. The Tyler Perry was a gentleman. He was great. The director, I thought, well, whatever. So that didn't turn out very well. I'm hopeful about some of the things we're doing now. I'm hopeful about The President is Missing. We have that's back on the track again. We actually had it with Showtime, and they had shot like 4 days, and then the virus shut it down, and they're not gonna open it up again. But we have some other place to do it now. So, it's always a matter of just getting with the right kind of partner. So we'll see. I thought the Netflix thing turned out pretty well. The documentary, the Filthy Rich.
Yes. Are you when you?
They should have used me a little bit more in it, but no, I'm kidding.
I want to get back to your little side comment about the New York Times. What do you think it is about you or writers, and I'll say this as lovingly as I possibly can, but writers like you that the Time eschews?
I don't know. I think, in England, actually the Times in England, they're very nice to me. I think in England, they accept mystery writing as a legitimate thing, not as much here, a little bit, that's all.
Yeah.
And I think they, I don't know, I don't even want to get into it, but I mean, there are a couple of sort of popular people that they just go, oh, that person's okay. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. I hate that kind of, competitive. It's a funny story. So I go to New York and I'm a baby and the book hasn't been published yet. And the agent, no, I'm sorry, he wasn't my agent. He actually was the first editor who wound up turning the book down. He was one of the 31. But we became friends and he invited me to this literary party, whatever. So I'm there and I'm talking to Wilfred Sheed. I don't know if you remember Wilfred Sheed, which is great. I loved his books, whatever. And I'm like a baby and he's 50 years old or something. And there's all this, something's going on. So I go down the hallway and it's this editor's bedroom and it's packed with literary types, whatever. And in the middle of the room, this true story. It's so freaking weird though. There are these two guys and they're sort of fisticuffs. They're not fighting, but they're arguing with sort of clenched fist. And there are these two little like poodles, and it's Norman Mailer and James Baldwin. And they're just arguing about literature and what's real literature, blah, blah, blah. Now, I happen to be a fan of both of them, a little more of Baldwin than Mailer.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, this is absurd. These two people are sitting there arguing about, and they're swearing that the other one is wrong. And you know what? They're both fine. They're both fine. And they're, and so I don't like all of that sort of petty baloney between writers. So I try to avoid it for the most part. And I'm fairly successful. But that was my lesson. It was like, you know what? This is sick. And, and here are all these, editors and whatever. They go, oh, isn't this great? And I'm going, yeah, it's funny. It's humorous. I mean, that was my take on it.
But, given that when your name is in the New York Times, it's at the top of the bestseller list. That's not bad.
God bless Dolly Parton. She put me into the last Sunday. I want to have lunch with James Patterson. God bless her.
Very, very nice. So I think we probably have time for one more question. I have to read one thing. I screwed up. I've been asked by Sarah to read.
Now, you screwed up several times.
Yeah, I'm.
We're going to actually point out several of those before we get done here.
Thank you. But
what's the one that you noticed?
No, the one that I noticed, I just need to re-record a question.
You didn't mess it up. Your internet messed you up.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it on the recording, but wait, let me start a new track because I'm not ready. Stand by.
Okay. All right.
Just one sec.
We'll do that quick. And then we'll have time for one more question when we come back. So if somebody has a really, really good one, please put it in the chat bar. The ones in there right now are okay, but I don't think they're up to James Patterson standards.
Yeah, we're waiting for the class.
I'm rolling when you are ready.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. So one of the things that I noticed in reading the book is that, and you just mentioned this, that it is fascinating by their babies. They're so young. Of course, at the beginning of of the book, you establish the ages, but then as they achieve this incredible success, and just unheard of success, you hear that they're 22 and 24 and 25, and that's just incredible to me of how much they achieved in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and they didn't spend much time in school. They just weren't ready, and nobody could be ready for what happened to them, but they weren't ready for it. And it really, I think, took John another 10 years before he actually started to mature and become what we would think of as an adult.
Excellent. Is that good, Sarah?
It's better than I could have hoped for. Thank you both.
Excellent.
The other answer was better. I don't remember what it was. All right, one more question, and I have to run.
That's no problem. Well, we have another quick question. Did you hear the recent Alec Baldwin interview with Paul McCartney?
No.
Okay. He
Good
said
question.
It was very sweet.
Good answer. Thank you so much. God bless.
James Patterson, you're the best.
Go to
Thank
those bookstores. They love you. Pick them up out front. Anything. Do anything you want. It's all good.
Thank you, James Patterson. Thank you, Joe
Have
Donahue.
a beautiful holiday season, and thank you very much.
You too. You too.
Yes.
God bless snow, but I prefer sunshine.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Northshire for being so wonderful. Support your local bookstore. Take care. Have a beautiful holiday. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your night. Take care.